They say the crash should have killed me. I sometimes think it did. And what walked out of the wreckage was only a ghost in search of something to anchor her back to life. Other days I laugh bitterly, because maybe fate simply enjoyed playing tricks, leaving me half broken in body and fully shattered in spirit. The night it happened, I had a career on the rise, a girlfriend who swore she loved me, a future I thought was certain. And then in one violent flash of metal, fire, and bone-crushing sound, it all disintegrated. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed with tubes running into me, machines breathing beside me, and silence louder than any scream. She came into my life with the scent of antiseptic and lavender lotion. Dr. Emily Carter, my attending physician, though I only learned her name much later. At first, she was just a pair of gentle hands adjusting my a voice firm but careful, reminding me to breathe through the pain. But there was something magnetic about her presence, something that reached past the numbness I had wrapped myself in. "You're lucky to be alive," she said one morning, pulling back the curtain that shielded me from the hallway. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that nothing about this felt lucky. But the words stuck in my throat because her eyes, hazel, with flecks of green that caught the sunlight streaming and wouldn't let me. They weren't the eyes of someone reciting medical protocol. They were eyes that saw me. The truth is, I didn't want to be seen. Not then. My girlfriend had stopped visiting after the second week, her texts turning shorter until they disappeared completely. My so-called friends visited once, took awkward photos, then faded away. The world outside moved on without me, and I remained trapped between pain and despair. Emily didn't move on. She sat by my bed long after her shift ended, sometimes reading her notes, sometimes just humming softly. Once, when she thought I was asleep, I felt her fingers lightly brush mine, as though she was trying to offer strength without crossing a line. It was ridiculous. I had nothing left to give, and yet I began to crave her presence like oxygen. One night, after another wave of nightmares pulled me from a fragile sleep, I found her there, adjusting my blanket. "You don't have to keep doing this," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I'm just another patient." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, bittersweet, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. Maybe. But sometimes patients become more than that. My chest tightened. For weeks I had drowned in the emptiness of being abandoned, and here she was, offering something I hadn't dared imagine, connection. But fear is a cruel companion. I pushed back. "Don't pity me." Her gaze didn't flinch. "I don't." That was the beginning of a dangerous, beautiful unraveling. Days blurred into each other, yet every time Emily entered the room, the air shifted. She'd tease me into eating when I wanted to give up, challenge me to take another step with the walker, even when my legs trembled. Once, she snuck in a small radio so I could listen to music, saying softly, "Healing isn't only about bones and scars." I found myself laughing again, rusty, awkward laughter that startled me as much as it delighted her. And when she laughed with me, it was like sunlight breaking through a storm. Still, I kept my distance. I told myself she was just kind, that I was imagining the way her hand lingered on mine, the way her voice softened when she said my name. I couldn't risk believing in something only to have it ripped away again. But the human heart doesn't ask permission before it begins to heal. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled outside, Emily stood by the window, her white coat draped loosely over her shoulders. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, yet somehow more beautiful than ever. I watched her for a long time before I realized she was watching me back. "What?" I asked, embarrassed by the heat in my cheeks. She shook her head, smiling gently. "You remind me what strength looks like." Strength. The word tasted foreign. I didn't feel strong. I felt fragile, dependent, scared. But when she said it, I wanted to believe. That night, when the ward grew quiet, she sat at the edge of my bed. The closeness was intoxicating, every nerve in my body alive with her nearness. "You're going to be okay," she murmured. "Not because of me, but because you're still here. That matters." I swallowed hard, fighting tears. For the first time since the accident, I let myself lean against someone, and it was her shoulder I leaned on. She didn't move. She just let me be. And in that silence, in that fragile intimacy, something undeniable sparked. I told myself it was a mistake, that leaning into her warmth was nothing more than exhaustion breaking me open. But in the days that followed, I kept replaying that moment, the quiet safety of her shoulder, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way I hadn't felt like a burden for once. And then came the night that changed everything. I had managed to walk 10 steps down the hallway, clutching my walker like a lifeline, when pain shot up my leg and I collapsed. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain itself. I lashed out, yelling at the nurse, at myself, at the world. I wanted to disappear back into the wreckage that had nearly killed me. Emily was there within minutes. She knelt beside me, ignoring the whispers of other staff. Her hand steadied me, but it was her voice that pierced through the storm. "Don't you dare give up now," she said, fierce but trembling. "I can't do this," I snapped, tears spilling before I could stop them. "I don't have anyone." No one stayed. No 1 inch. My voice broke, the truth slicing me open. Her grip on me tightened. I stayed. The words hit harder than any accident. They rang in my chest, undeniable, shattering the walls I'd built. For the first time, I let myself believe she meant more than duty. That night, she sat in my room long after visiting hours ended. The rain outside painted the world in silver streaks, and I found myself confessing everything: the betrayal of the girl I thought loved me, the loneliness that hollowed me out, the fear of never being whole again. Emily listened, never interrupting, her eyes soft and unwavering. When I finally fell silent, she reached for my hand. Her fingers laced with mine, warm and certain. "You're not broken," she whispered. "You're still here. That's everything." My heart stuttered, fragile but alive. And before I could stop myself, I whispered back, "You're the only reason I still want to be." The silence that followed was electric. She leaned closer, hesitation flickering in her eyes, as though she was fighting a battle between professionalism and something deeper. I made the choice for her. I closed the gap. Our lips met, tentative at first, then surging with all the emotions I had locked away: fear, longing, desperation, hope. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and trembling, but it was real. It was life pulsing back into me. When she finally pulled away, breathless, she cupped my cheek. "I shouldn't," she began, but her voice betrayed her. "Then don't say it," I murmured, tears spilling again, this time not from pain but from release. From that moment on, everything shifted. Recovery was still brutal. My body screamed with every exercise, scars itched and ached, nightmares clawed at me. But I wasn't alone anymore. Emily became more than my doctor. She was my anchor, my confidant, my light. She would sneak me coffee from her favorite cafe, the kind that made me wrinkle my nose until she laughed. She'd sit by my bed with a book, reading aloud in a voice that soothed even my darkest nights. Sometimes we'd just hold hands in silence, letting the world outside fade away. Of course it wasn't easy. Rumors stirred among staff. She worried about crossing lines, about risking her career. I worried about dragging her into my brokenness. But every time doubt crept in, we found our way back to each other. One evening, weeks later, when I finally managed to walk unassisted from one end of the ward to the other, she was waiting at the finish line. Her eyes glistened as I stumbled into her arms, both of us laughing through tears. "You did it," she whispered against my hair. "No," I whispered back, clinging to her. "We did." Leaving the hospital was bittersweet. I was terrified of losing her the way I had lost everyone else. But Emily didn't let me drown in fear. She drove me home herself, carried my bags inside, and when I asked if this was where it ended, she smiled, that soft, steady smile that had saved me more times than I could count. "This is where it begins," she said. And it did. The weeks turned into months. Physical therapy, long walks that left me breathless, small victories that felt monumental. Through it all, Emily was there. She wasn't just a doctor anymore. She was the woman who held me when nightmares came, who celebrated every step I took, who kissed the scars I once hated until I saw them as proof of survival. Love didn't erase the pain of what I'd lost, but it gave me something stronger, a reason to keep going. One spring morning, standing in a park with sunlight filtering through the trees, I turned to her. My body still bore the traces of what I'd endured, but my heart beat steady, alive. "You saved me," I said softly. She shook her head, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "No, you saved yourself. I just stayed." I kissed her then, not from desperation but from joy, because she was right. Survival had been my fight. But love? Love was ours. And as her hand slipped into mine, warm and certain, I realized something I never thought I would again. I hadn't lost everything in that crash. I had found the one thing that mattered most. Her. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.